Computer. Okay, Father, we just thank you for this time we can be together and for the little rain that we even had this afternoon, how refreshing that was. And Lord, we just pray you'll bless tonight and bless those who's come out. And even though we were talking about secular stuff and rescue work and ropes and all of this kind of stuff, it segues so much into spiritual things. And I pray that each individual would be able to apply something to their life tonight that will just go out much stronger than when we were and more at peace than when we came in. And we give you praise for this in Jesus' name. Amen. So following the tracks. Okay. Uh, like I said, the book is kind of divided into three sections. The biggest section are rescue stories, which I always start with a verse and kind of end with some kind of a spiritual quip. And then the second section is wilderness safety. And I think that's so important in the book because, you talk about all these rescuers, and then, like I've said before, 99% could have been avoided had people just did the right thing at that time. And so I figured I put that safety in there for those of us. And these safety things can apply to more than just out in the mountains, sometimes just daily life and living and things like this. And then the third section is several chapters on spiritual wrap up. So I try and take one or two of each of those sections each night. So the first one, I'm going to do a story on chapter 9 and then one on chapter 13. So tracking lost hikers. It kind of reminds of Psalm 25, 4 through 5, which I put in the book. It says, make me know your way. So that's what the discussion question is tonight. If you do that one, number one, how do we know what God's ways are? How do we know when it's just us, coming up with something? Teach me, make me know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me. For you're the God of my salvation. For you, I will wait all the day. I think sometimes God allows us to get off the path. And I think sometimes he deliberately does not tell us what choice to make. Because by making choices on our own and hitting dead ends, begins to hone our spiritual antennas, whereby we can start saying, okay, yeah, I can see where that was really me. And I can start going A, B, C. Yeah, okay, that was me. And so sometimes by allowing us to go off the track a little bit here and there, I think is good spiritually because it makes us think, it really makes us hone in. I was listening to a radio preacher the other day, and good grief, this guy's got to have a photographic memory. A caller will say, Joshua 2:7, oh yeah, da 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 da, and I think, good grief, I hate people like that, don't you? I have to work at stuff and then I have to work and work and work to memorize. But I think sometimes that's good because if all of a sudden you look at something and just got it memorized, well, why do I have to look at it again? Whereby people like myself, well, I've got to dive into it and dissect it and go over it, memorize it and go over it again. Sometimes I think that causes us to really dig in and churn. Now, for those of you with photographic memories, I'm not downing you. I wish I had that. But there's nothing wrong with having to dig and getting off track and having to work your way back on in life, spiritually and physically, because I think that hones sometimes our skills. Now, one of the things with lost hikers we would do, and many times, often when we get into lost hikers, one of the first things they often do is get off trail and go to the path of least resistance, and that's downhill. And especially not wanting to climb back up to where they knew their last known point was. They're tired, they're exhausted. It's the end of the day. They keep going downhill. So it makes it hard for us as searchers because now we don't know where they've gone. So one of the things that we have to do is lay out a map, a topographical map. We use compasses and we use GPS units. GPS units are great, but if batteries go down or you hit a rock and it goes out, you're lost. Compasses are great, but if cloud cover comes in or night comes in, so we work with both. Sometimes would go out in the desert and to way close to the Arizona border and would do map and compass out there. And I remember one of the times we were out there doing it, our training officer says, I want all of you to bring your GPSs up here and put them here. You're doing strictly map and compass. This is the only thing you've got. So we have to, work on that. And so we triangulate usually off a couple points and peaks and really just worked and worked and worked till we honed it in. So mapping out a direction of travel early in a search operation requires accurate information. Mapping our spiritual life requires accurate information. Where do we get accurate information from? Here. Okay, we get it right here. There's been a lot of things hitting the news lately whereby we can take political things right now and try and make spiritual connotations out of it. Um, oh, should I say it or not? One of the things you're probably going to start hearing, as you know, that President Trump has or really orchestrated a peace deal in the Middle East. Okay, right away, people are going to say, "Is this the Antichrist?" Okay, you're going to hear that, I'm sure, because the Daniel chapter 9 says that there's going to be a peace treaty made with Israel. Well, you've got to look at the wording. No, he's not going to be the Antichrist because Daniel 9 doesn't say that this Antichrist is going to make a treaty between Israel and an enemy country. It says he's going to make a peace treaty with Israel. Well, President Trump didn't make a peace treaty with Israel. This person making the treaty is against Israel. So Trump, it doesn't fit. So you've got to understand what Daniel chapter 9 says. So Daniel 9 is talking about some kind of an antichrist who is fighting Israel and is going to make a treaty with Israel, not with Israel and its neighbors. So we've got to be real careful of things like that. Just a couple of weeks ago, a thing hit, I don't know if you know, hit the news that Jesus was coming a week and a half ago. And I don't know how did many of you hear about that? All over. It was all over internet, and there was this incredible map laid out how it is going to come September. I forget a couple days it was supposed to be. No, it didn't happen. And so, we have to be really careful about these things. And we got to make sure that this is our compass bearing right here, because we're going to start hearing a lot of credible people start saying things that we got to get into this and say, wait. Let's hold on. Let's look at the wording. Because Kim was just saying this afternoon, she said, watch, people are going to start saying, man, is he the Antichrist? It says he's going to make a peace treaty with Israel. Well, no, President Trump made a peace treaty between Israel and the neighbors between them. Okay, where 9 was saying something completely different. So be careful of that. You're probably going to hear that coming out pretty soon. Now, all search and rescue members, again, we've got to learn the art of tracking, and it's spiritual too. We've got to learn the art of tracking so we don't suddenly gobble up what maybe a famous author or someone may be saying. We challenge it. We challenge it with scripture. And the scripture says, a study to show thyself approved. We take things and we study it and we match it with scripture. And so when we tracked, we did it's actually a really simple technique, and we learned to do it through the United States Border Patrol. They taught us the art of tracking. And so what it is, I've kind of explained it before. The equipment we use is basically our hiking sticks. Almost every one of us carried hiking sticks. They're really good to hike with, one, as you're doing it. And there's kind of a technique to use a hiking stick. A lot of people try and, those on Zoom, hiking stick here. Okay, a lot of people try and, put it way out here. And then what they're doing, they're raising their body up. That's wasted effort. You want it a little bit shorter and kind of put it behind you so it kind of pushes you forward, like this. Don't go out like that and up and down. So there's little techniques with these. But also coming down a trail, that's when you can put them out out a bit and then just kind of, step into it. It helps your knees and ankles and all sorts of things. But these are incredible tracking utensils. So what I've kind of mentioned this before, but I showed you this slide before, but what we would do, and it's an incredible way to find a lost person. First of all, if we can find their automobile is key right there. Find their automobile and look, find the passenger door and look straight down there. You're probably going to see their footprint, the boot print or something right at the door. And so what we'd do is would maybe send one of our trackers in and would drag the stick, like if the car was over there and I were going to do it, I would drag the stick behind me to that print, probably take a picture of it with my phone and would spread it around. In the days before our phones, we had to draw the footprint out. Now, the reason why we would drag the stick is because then we want to make sure we come out the exact same way. Because also we come out and come this way and around, we could be mudding up the footprints. We don't know where that next step is. And so what we would do is we would take this part of the tracking stick and we would measure how long his foot is from heel to toe. So let's say his footprint is this long. So I'd adjust my stick like here. Lift this 25-pound thing up. So I would, I'd measure it. Okay, that's the length of the shoe. And then the second thing we'd do is measure the stride from from heel to heel. From here, be from the heel to the heel. So then what I'd do, we would go from this point, which is the heel, to let's say it's this point. So now I know the length of his foot, okay, and I know his stride is from heel to heel. So if I can find one track, I should be able to put this on the heel and swoop, and I should find the next heel print right here, somewhere from here to here. Chances are he's not going to make a 360 straight behind him. He probably doesn't have twisting ankles, And so somewhere in there, there's got to be another one. Sure enough, there it is. So then you take this one, lay it on that one, make about 180 or so. You're going to find the next one. Now, sometimes you won't find anything, and all we might find is a little pebble pressed in the dirt. Well, something had to press that. The pebbles just don't go in the dirt. So that's got to be the heel print or some part of the print. It's very tedious. So we need three people, one on the ground, on her knees, going like this, okay, tracking it. Okay, then at least two, three is kind of really good. But then another person, at least a second behind, looking ahead. Because, if all of us are just looking at the ground and all of a sudden we can say, hey, the prints is all right there. We were doing every year, our team was part of the MRA, Mountain Rescue Association. It's a national organization that you have to test rigorously to get into, and our team became part of that. And so once a year, all the teams in California would meet at one spot, and one year would be a snow scenario. We had to do a rescue in the snow. Another year, it'd be a rock scenario. We'd have to rescue someone over a cliff. The third year would be a tracking one where we had to go through the desert and find someone. Well, this particular year, it was a tracking exercise, and our team was to be evaluators. So I was evaluating one of the teams, and they were kind of, I think, a younger team, great people. They really got along with each other, but they were tracking. And so they were trying to find this lost or injured person. Well, they finally got the track to about here. We make this turn, and they're looking down at the ground, track to track. Well, about where the back wall was a rock mound, and there was a whole bunch of it was fake blood on that rock mound. Well, they weren't looking up to see it. Had someone looked up and said, there's blood, I think that's a clue, but no, they were right down here tracking and tracking and tracking. And so, when we were debriefing, I said, well, someone with the tracking really needs to be looking out ahead, for obvious things. sometimes I think we're that way spiritually too. We get so embedded in our situation, the way we are now. All is lost. We can't see ahead. And when sometimes God is saying, look, you just look at let's think of the long shot for a second. You're not going to be in this forever, for one thing. Think of heaven. Think what's going to be like when we get there. None of this is going to matter. Look out there, or say, look out there and say, do you remember? You could even look backwards and say, when God did this. Oh, okay. So now if he did it back there, can I trust him for out here? Yeah. And so it'd be a tedious thing. Now, you might think, well, that's going to take forever to find someone. Well, what we would do then, if we had a line of travel from this first team going, let's say, northeast, then we'd send another team out maybe half a mile to where if it looked like he was following a trail, we might send another team maybe half a mile out and see if they found those same tracks. Then we'd set them on it. Now we're half a mile ahead. And if they were on it, we'd keep this team because he could have veered off and that could be another set. So this first team still keeps going. That second team, then we send a third team, maybe a mile or two even farther out or way up there. And by leapfrogging like this, in a very short period of time, we can find them. And so this is how we would go with tracking, and then using, a tracking stick like this can come in very, very handy. Now, I said it consists of a hiking pole and a flashlight. Well, the flashlight, believe it or not, the best time to find tracks, believe it or not, is at night. Because when you make an imprint, like you see here on the screen, if it was night and I got a flashlight, held it down to the ground, all those little divots would suddenly pop up, just kind of like a fluorescent light. The hardest time to track is at noon when the sun is straight over, because the little divots in the bottom of a boot print does not cast a shadow. The reason why you're seeing the imprint there, if you could get close enough, there are actually shadow lines under that. So the sun was, when I took this picture, obviously was not straight overhead. If it was overhead, you probably wouldn't even see that print. So a flashlight is good at night. Now I said a mirror. Why do you need a mirror? Well, you're not going to groom yourself while you're on the trail. But if it is daylight, what can really be effective is to lay that mirror down at ground level and tilt it so you get a reflection of light right down at ground level, and it will then cast a shadow, okay, across those imprints. So doing kind of tricks like that is really, really helpful in tracking. Another thing, a lot of people, so the footprint is one of the most obvious things for not only a tracking team, but for a lost hiker. A lot of times a person would get out there and say, I don't even know where I am. Well, if you're in dirt or something, look down at your feet. Okay, follow your tracks back to where the known point was. Now, I say that cautiously, only if you can tell your tracks, because often what we do is tell people, if you're lost, stay put, because chances are you're going to go farther and farther away, which will be a story I'll tell you tonight. And now it's the cat and mouse, we're doing this kind of thing. Whether if they stay put, we can and should find them. But if you know it's your tracks, follow them back. Follow your footprints back. People don't even think of that, Look at your surroundings. As you're out in the wilderness hiking or something, is that a prominent peak over there? Okay, as I'm walking, is it to my back? Well, if all of a sudden I get lost, I think, oh, there's that big peak. I know I need to keep that in front of me. I know that's the direction I need to go. So, and a lot of people don't do that. When they start hiking, they're just going along and they're not looking at obvious things way out there. So if suddenly you get lost, you can look at it. Oh, I remember that was on my left when I was going this way. So obviously, if I want to go back, I'll keep that point, a peak, a hill, top, radio tower, whatever, on my right. And so things like that we do. Now, sometimes a lot of these pictures I show are pictures that's in my book, and this is one of them. And sometimes, depending on the weather, we would camp with the subjects all night, would find them, 1, 2 in the morning, and tired, they're tired, we're tired. And so we'll just stay with them through the night. Until morning comes, and hopefully a helicopter would come like that These are our bivy sacks. Those of you online see the blue thing, baby sack. Okay, that we would often carry with us if we had to spend the night. I remember one time we had to spend the night in the snow. It was very, very cold. So my partner and I got pine needles and put all on top of the snow, trying to do it, and then would zip this open, stuff our sleeping bag in there, would crawl in and zip it closed and sleep for a couple hours. So it's kind of a little one-person quick tent that would use, and so would stay with the person usually through the night. And the thing is, like I was saying, hikers quite often tend to get tunnel vision. They tend to watch only their feet or their immediate surroundings, and forget to look farther out. Like this was I think this was actually a search that was taking place. And I'm trying to remember, my buddy took this one. I don't think we were out. I think we were in the western part of maybe the Mojave Desert here, or it was just east of the 15, doing just some kind of search. But you can see how if you were going to go in the desert, and desert is the hardest, one of the easiest places to get lost because sometimes there's not much to see. But here again, if you know the mountainside is on your left side and you're going to go, let's say according to this picture, east, keep that on your left, and on the way back, you'd make it to your right. Hikers should always look for nearby canyons, prominent hilltops, roads, geological features, the direction of travel. Are we going north, south, west, east? Kind of common things like this. So, cell phones. Another thing, when you're hiking, always turn your cell phone off or at least on airplane mode, because what happens is you get in the canyon and your cell phone is draining the battery very, very quickly, trying to reach signals and this kind of thing. I can't tell you how many times we had a rescue call, a 911 come in, and they're saying, hey, we're lost, we're somewhere on Mount Baldy. And they're with the phone. It was dead. All day long, had been trying to get signals, receive, send, and right at the end there, it dies on them when they're trying to make a call. So be very, very careful of that. And if you're going to make a call to someone, then maybe arrange a time. Okay, at 2 o'clock, I'll try and reach them and try and get a point where you've got some coverage if you can. But you do it very, very sparingly. Um, let's see here. Now, to kind of show you this, I'll tell you a little story. This still goes in following the tracks about two lost hikers we had in Mount Baldy. Now, what the hikers were doing, they were going to summit to the top of Mount Baldy. But by the way, if you're ever looking at Mount Baldy, again, you don't really see it from our city. You've got to go west of here at about Upland. You'll see two humps. This is the main Mount Baldy, sometimes called Old Baldy. But then there's another hump to the west, and you don't hear that name, but it's called West Baldy, actually. And it's just a little bit lower than Mount Baldy. Mount Baldy is like 10,064 feet, something like that. So it's right at 10,000 feet, and this one to the left is just a little bit lower, and this one off to the right is the one right above where I say Sierra Hut. That's Mount Harwood. And so what these hikers did, they went up to the top of Mount Baldy, but they would be starting their descent. What happened, if you look at the arrows here, when you're on the top of Mount Baldy, you're supposed to go down and take the red path going to the right. Those of you online, it'd be this one here. Those up here, you're supposed to go down to the right. Okay, now that big section there is Baldy Bowl. And again, you can't really see it. If you're in Upland, you can see a little bit of it facing to the east. But it's an avalanche-prone area. People get hurt in that quite a bit. Adventure skiers like to try and ski down in the winter, but if you don't know how to make an avalanche pit, it's best to stay off of it because we've had rescues on that thing. And so what happens is you're just coming down from the top, that red line, right there at that western edge of Baldy Bowl, you need to make a left-hand turn and it'll take you east down into San Antonio Canyon, down that canyon. Now, that green box, there's a hut there. Some of you have been on this trail, you know what I'm talking about. It's for the Sierra Club owns it. It's called, and we call it the Sierra Hut Trail. Those of us who kind of go on it, we call the Sierra Hut Trail. Well, what happens has happened over the years is when you get to that point where you're supposed to go to the right, enough people have been going straight along that ridge line and has made a false trail. And then what that does, that drops you into what we call Good Canyon. And there is nothing good about Good Canyon. Once you get into that canyon, you will not get out of it until the next morning. You're going to be boulder hopping. I'm talking boulders the size of cars or houses, or like a whole room, a bedroom kind of thing, these rocks, and you're sliding down and slipping. And so making their way across the top of Baldy Bowl, sure enough, they mistakenly took the wrong path into Good Canyon. Now here we are. Our job is to try and find these guys. So we're going to go up to the Sierra Hut. We're making the main trail, and we get to that intersection of Good Canyon and San Antonio Canyon. Now, kind of stopping the story for a second, knowing that this would be an all-nighter, okay, we figured that. We took extra headlamps, batteries, radios, food, clothing, water. And those of you who've done a lot of hiking, these are called our 10 essentials. Now, again, there's like extra batteries, extra food, extra water, extra clothing, your first aid kit, sunscreen, whistle, so and so. So there's about like 10 things we call the 10 essentials you should always have in your pack, even if it's going to go for a few hours or a day trip or even a long trip. You should always have these things with you. And so if the subjects were not injured, we'd usually find them cold, thirsty, hungry, and have to give them this stuff. So not only were we carrying stuff for us, we often have to carry extra for them as well. Well, we suddenly found their footprints leading down from the Baldy Trail into Good Canyon. So sure enough, they missed it, and they're going down that red line down into Good Canyon. Now, as we started down, we were looking because we found tracks up there and we saw that that's where they're headed. So a little bit farther down, we found some candy wrapper, some food wrappers. And since the footprints and wrappers appeared fresh, we started our downward path and arduous hike into Good Canyon, thinking, oh boy, this is tough. Well, they kept on going. They didn't stop. And the problem is, I said, hikers will take the path of least resistance when they're tired. And these hikers, this is a very steep drop into that canyon. And if at the end of the day you're tired, you look up and say, there's no way I'm going back up there. So you see all the glowing lights down in the valley. So I think all we need to do is just go down that way. It's a shortcut. It's not a shortcut. So we keep going, and all along the way, we found more tracks. That is not us. It's just something I thought I'd throw in there. Now, unfortunately, they didn't stay put. They kept moving farther away from us and from the Baldy Trail. Again, like I've said here before, lost hikers tend to take the path of least resistance, which is down. Even though they know they're off trail, they keep going down. It happens time and time and time again, and further away from the trail. And usually canyons are not straight north, south, west, east. They're usually veering off. And it's very easy to think you're going due east when suddenly you're not going due east, you're going due west, or you're going due south, because when you're in the mountains, it's so easy to get disoriented. And you think you people who live in Riverside, you know what I'm talking about. There is no such thing as a north, south, west, east street in Riverside. Everything is this way, that way, crossing and over. And so it's kind of like driving in Riverside. You think you're going due east, and no, you're not. You're going south, or something like that. Well, enough of that. So they often, and now this is where they make mistakes, is mistaking game trails for the actual trails. Now, animals are not stupid. They're very, very smart, and they know where they are, but they will take the path of least resistance, but they're doing it in a smart way. They know what they're doing. So I'm going to show you a little video here about this guy. Apparently this is up in the Yukon. So you're going to see grizzly bears You're going to see all sorts of animals. And what this guy did, he put a camera up at this particular trail here out in the middle of nowhere, and he filmed it for 5 months. Okay, now in that 5 months, he condensed it to like a little 5 minute video. And you're going to see all the animals that go back and forth until it makes a trail. And it's a game trail. And so animals, like I said, they're not stupid animals. If there's a little trail that's been made, they're going to follow it. If it's easier, and it becomes a little bigger and bigger. And so this is what gets hikers so confused is because suddenly, if you're not looking and your trail suddenly goes to the left, but a game trail continues to the straight, hikers will continue on that game trail thinking it's the real trail. But usually game trails are not very well made like the Forest Service trail is. Forest Services are really good on their trails, making them obvious. Sometimes they get a little bit nebulous, but it's pretty obvious. But a game trail, you can tell, man, there wasn't a lot of effort by the Forest Service in this. So that's when you stop and think, I better go back. I think I've missed it. So take a look at this. It's kind of interesting, but you're going to see how game trails are made. Um, okay, so here. Now, okay, let me stop 1 second. Now, you're going to see how many animals keep within 5 months are going back and forth. You're going to notice one tree back here that apparently has a certain scent that is going to draw animals too. So kind of watch this. Coming out over the speakers. Okay. Oops, sorry. I turned that off. It's supposed to come out here, but it's okay. Tree. All these are the same trail. Okay, you see all so on that tree. Okay, we'll go. But notice they're all taking that same pathway. Up in the Yukon. Let's do it. Yeah. Let's do it. How many of you do that on the wall at home? The corner. Yeah, no, they're no different than us. There you go. Oh, they're big. It's right by the camera. It's amazing. Now we see him a lot. He likes that too. Okay, we'll go off. Mhm. They're obviously smelling the scent of other bears on that tree, lumbering along. Same trail. He's coming back. Don't veer off to that same path. And that you can see it how over 5 months that trail isn't any wider. Man, it's just oh, and that's usually how you tell game trails. They're very, very narrow going by. Oh no, that was the owl. Yeah, he was on it. No, there's our jolly little fella here. There's a kitty. It's almost done there. Found a mate this time. Big guy. Oh, look how narrow that they walk, how big of animals they are. They just walk that. Oh, he kind of got off. There's always one in the bunch. I've done my own path. This little guy, he just keeps going. They think that that trail would be really wide. But no, it's very narrow. You don't want to mess with that guy. Did he? Oh, it's winter. You can see how big these guys are. They're probably right before hibernation. They're so big. Oh, yeah. I got one more time before we hibernate. One more. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Ah, you didn't do it. Okay. So anyway, so that's it, and so that's kind of it on the game trails. I thought that'd be kind of fun to show what it's like. But anyway, so here we are. They apparently followed the wrong trail like that, went down into Good Canyon. So we were whistling, hollering. These two guys on the right, those are the two that we found. My friend in the orange, that's Eric, who I talk about all the time. One of my best buddies there on the team. He and I have lunch still to this day, we still have lunch every Wednesday at El Pollo Loco, either in Upland or Rancho. So if you ever stop in one of those two places on a Wednesday around 4:30, you'll probably see us there. But that's the two guys that we were finding. So luckily, they apparently they must have bedded down for the night, and we finally caught up to them. But right before we still hadn't found them, my partner, I remember, said, let's make one more blast because we've been blowing our whistles and yelling. We did one more time, and man, this time we heard them. We heard them, and they were right around the corner from us. And sound is crazy. Those who have been in the mountain areas, you can blow whistles and yell, and some right around the corner, not too far, not hear a thing. It's amazing how the vegetation sometimes can just zap up noise, but other times in a canyon, it can go very far distances. So our hikers hollered back. We found them just behind a rock outcropping. They were very exhausted. And again, I wrote here, I can't explain the feeling we get when suddenly we hear that call. I mean, we were dead tired all through the night. We hadn't slept until the night before. Our feet were tired going down. We still had a long way to go. And all of a sudden we hear him yell, and man, that energy just surges into you. Yes, we've got him. Here we are. We radio back in. And we say, could you send a helicopter for us? The adrenaline rush energizes us. And that's kind of it. I think it's a lot of times, don't you find that spiritually? When all of a sudden, maybe you're in a prayer group or something, or you're reading scripture and something's just hits you've never seen before, that spiritual charge that comes in may not necessarily be a physical charge, it's a spiritual charge. And we only got that physical charge and emotional charge because we stayed, on what we thought was the known path. It wasn't the correct known path, but it was the correct one to find them. And that's the same thing with us. And we stay on the path and this, sometimes I hear people, oh, who's your favorite spiritual author? And read all these books. Sometimes I think if we'd spend as much time reading this one rather than what other people are saying about this, I think sometimes we could get a lot farther ahead. And not that those books are wrong, but sometimes I just wonder if we spent less time reading about what others are saying about the Bible rather than taking the time to read about what the Bible itself says. I think sometimes we might be a little farther ahead. An incredible amount of energy will just flow through our bodies. We arrived to find him without any injury. And thinking of God's divine intervention, I think of these Psalms. God says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will advise you with my eye upon you. Now, granted, like I said in the beginning, I think there are sometimes God allows us to go off the path. Let us wallow around in there. Not that he's mad at us, not that anything like that, but I could almost guarantee those two hikers, next time they went into the mountains, they're going to be a lot more aware of how to hike because of that experience. So they actually, in the long run, came out a lot better. And I think sometimes God allows that for us to get off track. I don't think he always tells us exactly what to do. I think he lets us plot our course and figure things out spiritually. But yet at the same time, we're still trusting because even if we are off track, he's our spiritual search and rescue team. He's honed in on us. He hasn't let us go. He's still with us. So we're still trusting him with all our heart. And we're not leaning on our own understanding, our thoughts or negative thoughts, and acknowledge him. And he's going to make our path straight. And sometimes that straight path is leading back from a crooked one. Okay, the straight path isn't always straight in our life. Sometimes we're on a crooked path, and that straight path is bringing us back. Um, and so. Uh, So anyway, here they were, and there's nothing as sure as a helicopter coming up the canyon. You can always hear that sound, before you see the helicopter way back, because we're always hoping, please send it by first light, please send a helicopter. Well, luckily they did, and they had to do a hoist because we couldn't, it was so brushy, they couldn't do a landing. And so it's kind of a funny thing. I'm trying to remember if I put this in here. Yeah, I didn't. The medic who was, I say dropped off. They didn't push her out. It was a doctor, a medical doctor on a hoist line. They lowered her down. Well, she's coming down, she's kind of swinging around. If she doesn't smack one of the guys right in the face, blood's coming out of his nose and everything. And we're thinking, you're not supposed to do this, The poor guy, she feels horrible. We think, okay, here's a lawsuit, And so anyway, we get taken up and in, and it was really kind of crazy because it was a while later after all this happened. My mother had to go into the Riverside Hospital for an emergency thing. Well, it wasn't a real emergency, but she had to go in, and we were in actually, well, I guess it kind of was an emergency because we were in the emergency room. And if lo and behold, if you're in the emergency room, I guess it's an emergency. Here comes that lady, that doctor, and I said, that's that doctor. That's just bloodied her guy's nose. So she's working with aviation as well as she's an ER doctor. And I said, "Hey, do you remember a rescue you were on, and they lowered you out of a helicopter, you smacked the guy in the nose and bloodied him all up?" Yeah, well, we were the search team on that. Oh, well, she is all ecstatic, and we became very good friends, believe it or not, after that, Kim and I and she, and so it was kind of an interesting story how things go around. But we got airlifted out of it. So by then our helicopters were bigger. Notice there's doors on them, there's seats inside. So that was one. Another one that I wanted to talk about, it's one of the chapters in the book called an 800-foot snow extraction. This was one of the most challenging rescues that we did. So what was happening here is, well, let me give you Psalms 121. My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. Again, when we get off track, we think we're off. We don't even know if we're on track or off track in life sometimes, but we look to the Lord. He's not going to allow our foot to slip. And a slip means, uh, yes, we're going to make mistakes. Yes, bad things happen in life. John tells us that in this life you will have difficulties, but I have overcome the world. And so not allowing our foot to slip. Couple things. Spiritually, one, we will never lose our salvation. Never. And number two, we will never slip out of his grasp. We will never slip out of his eye. We'll never slip out of his comfort zone. We'll never slip out of his arms. So not allowing our foot to slip, okay, that means out of him, out of his control, okay, out of his presence, out of his guidance. He who keeps us will not slumber ever. And so, what was happening here um, is we got a call that there were four young men that had hiked up apparently to the top of Mount Baldy, and they hadn't come home that night. And so it was a snowstorm. It was very cold up there, extremely cold. And it was sleet. That kind of sleet is a mixture of snow, rain, whatever, freezing. That was going up there. And so we were called out, there were three of us that were called out on this. And I explained it quite a bit here in the book. But what made it difficult is we were in the snow. Now, this is a different picture. This isn't the actual one because the actual one was at night, but it gives you an idea of walking in the snow. Snow presents a lot of challenges. So think of these three guys as the three of us, but it's nighttime. We're carrying big packs like this. We've got our crampons on. So we have unstable footing. Walking on snow and ice presents challenges. The idea of slipping, I've talked about that. How to stop after a fall, again, talked about that. It's slow, it's meticulous walking. Now, with us on this particular night, we weren't going downhill, we were going uphill. I'll show you on the map in just a little bit. We've got specialized gear with us. We've got these things on, okay, these crampons on, boots and everything. So we've got these hiking in the snow, watching each of our footprints going along, our footsteps. We had an arduous trek before us. It was winter, it was sleet. Four young men didn't come home from their hike in Mount Baldy. Now, a snowstorm had hit our local mountains and leaving the slopes icy. So if you can take a look at this picture, because I don't have one with us that night, but think of snow covering this whole area here. So we were going up, that red line there is going up San Antonio Canyon, okay, the right where it kind of bends to the left would be the Sierra Hut Trail. Now, we were going up there. We didn't know where these guys were. All we knew that they had gone somewhere up to the top of Mount Baldy at the peak up there. Now, we prepared ourselves again with crampons. We're doing snow stuff. So as we started along the Sierra Hut Trail, what is going to happen, unbeknown to us, it is going to turn into a cross-country nightmare. The severe winter conditions made our search stressful as we continued up that bottom part of the red line there. You can see a little bit of Good Canyon off to the left. That's kind of a little red line. We knew the low temperatures could prove fatal for these four young men. We were just kind of guessing they probably weren't prepared to spend the night because they were just planning a day trip. After repeated whistles, blowing, and hollering, we finally heard a faint response up where that red dot is. Now we're down below at the big, thick dot. Okay, so what we had, I mean, that big thick red line, what we had to do was go up that thinner red line to that red dot. And this is going to be very, very difficult. It was steep. We yelled at them, "Are you injured?" And we got a yes. And we thought, oh boy. And so that is going to now open up a whole nother can of worms. How injured is this person? How are we going to get them down? And so on. And the problem is during snowstorms, aviation won't fly. Now, today they do a lot of night, they've got infrared, they've got night vision. So today they fly in areas that years ago they wouldn't touch at all. In fact, they wouldn't even fly at night. When our team was young, because they didn't have any of this night equipment with them. Once the sun went down, it was over with. And so, but even today, if it's really windy, they won't fly up there. If it's bad with snow, cloud cover, they won't fly. And so we didn't know really what we were going to look into. All we knew, we had to go cross country up to them. So we had to keep yelling at them to try and get our bearings straight. So often going uphill, what makes this so difficult is you might have to do what we call a toe kick, where you're kicking the front points of your crampon. Notice the front are out that way. And so that's for coming in, digging into, like you're seeing on the picture, the front of the slope. And obviously, you can't make all points contact. And so it's got to be a toe kick. So you're making little divots into the snow as you're going up. And and so depending on how icy it is, and sometimes the snow is be soft, and now you punch through. So it's just very, very becoming very difficult. And so in a toe kick, the front points dig in. Our slope wasn't as steep as this picture is showing. That's really, really steep. We're actually having to be on rope. So luckily ours wasn't that steep, but we're having to go up. Takes a lot of time, draining of energy. And so what happened here is the hikers went along the false trail. So at that intersection, you can see what I've got written. The hikers should have gone this route, okay, down into San Antonio Canyon where the Sierra Hut is. Those of you online, you can see they should have taken the trail to the right. What the hikers did, they didn't go into Good Canyon, but they continued hiking along that ridge line, which is the west side of San Antonio Canyon. And that's very, very steep. And so we made our way kind of a horseshoe up and around to them. And so there they are stuck. And at that point, there was no way they were getting down. It was 800 feet down to the bottom, and they would have just slid uncontrollably. It would have killed them had they tried to slid down there. And in front of them, going south, toward where you are going south, it was drop off. So they were stuck. They were just simply stuck. So we get to them. They were cold, lost, and luckily they decided to stop where they were. They had no clue, what to do. By now, the bad weather turned into freezing sleet. And so, since we carried emergency tarps, we instantly made a shelter. We strung it over the trees so the rain and the sleet wasn't coming down on us. We heated some food. We had little stoves, backpacking stoves with us. We heated some food, got them hydrated, got them some food in there. And we realized we can't wait till morning. We got to get these guys down now, immediately. And so what we were looking at is lowering these four young men, 800 feet down the slope. Now, our ropes were probably 75 feet long because we were taking our small personal 9 millimeter ropes, where our big ropes are 12 millimeter ropes, much, much bigger, and they're 150-foot lengths. And so we were either about 75 is all we could do at a time. And so we needed the bigger ropes. So realizing the situation we were in, we decided we're going to have to lower one at a time our 75 feet, because luckily down the side of this one steep slope, there were bushes kind of down. And so what Eric would have to, what he did, he would go down and make an anchor point, and we would look, we put them in bivy sacks like this. And so we put them in there, got them warm, put sit harnesses on them, clipped them in, and the two of us up on top would lower them down to where Eric was. Number two would go down, three would go down, four. And the whole time they had to lay in this on the snow and they were getting really cold. We were there freezing. Well, the problem is our ropes weren't long enough. So we radioed, we need the 150-foot lengths of 1/2 inch rescue rope to belay our hikers down. Now, where things get interesting, to this day, I am not sure how the following events happened. But all I know, I remember saying, Eric, we can't wait till morning. We've got to go now. We've got to get these guys down now. All of a sudden, a member of another team who I did not recognize approached us with a 150-foot rope coming up from the south side. Now, he was by himself. Said he's from another team. Neither of us could explain how he got there as quick as he did. We spent all night getting to this guy, radioing, and all of a sudden this guy comes up with a 150-foot rope. We never send rescuers out alone. The command post down there would not have done that. He was by himself. What took us all night to hike to this rescuer a fraction of the time to reach us. Strangely, he gives us the rope and we're working, so we're not thinking logically, we're not thinking anything, we're just saying we've got to get down, you've got the rope. And he says he's got to leave us because he's got work to do. I think he had work to do. And he goes down, and I remember, I think he kind of made a turn and not thinking of him, I never saw him again. I never saw him going down the slope. I never saw where he went, where he came from. Literally, we had a 150-foot load. Our angels unaware. God provides in miraculous way to this day. I've talked to Eric about this. We had no idea where this guy came from. We had no idea where he went. All I know is this guy came out with a 150-foot length rope. So take it as you want. I'll tell you, I don't know. All I can say is I know angels are aware. I know I've experienced it, and you probably have too, and maybe not even knowing it. But that was one of the most amazing things in my time of rescue I can ever say. Well, anyway, now we had the arduous task of lowering each one 800 feet down. Now we could go 150 feet. So Eric would go down there, made an anchor point, clipping points, send one down, bring the rope up, send a second, third, fourth. We probably made 8 different pitches, 4 different times down the slope. It was one of the most cold periods of time, other than the time where the kids' tents were breaking apart. I ever had, because we had to give them some of our stuff. And we would just stand there, our feet in the snow, as we were lowering it. Eric down there had a little bit better because he could hike down at a time, clip in, and he was kind of working it. But we were just kind of standing there. And I remember I was to the point of, I don't know how much longer I can take it. I remember it took me several days to actually warm up after that. After that time, I got cold really fast. I don't know what happened to me physiologically or whatever. Ken remembers. I was just suddenly just start getting cold. It wouldn't take much for me to, something happened in that time. I'm normal now, but for a few days after that, it was really, really strange. So what happened, we finally got all 4 down. The 4th guy, we only had 150 feet to go. He couldn't stand it any longer. He was so cold. He unclipped himself and just slid down like a toboggan. At the bottom was this rock mound, rocks, big things. Eric was down there. He says, there's no way I could stop this guy. He was zinging down the thing. No, we've gone all this way. He's going to crash into the rocks. And it would have been really, really bad. It's just going like a toboggan. He stopped. Luckily, the Lord just was, I know, had to been in on this. He stopped, before he hit the rocks, he was the guy. One of them, what happened? The injury was a sprained ankle. So luckily it wasn't really bad. And I don't know if it was the cold or what, just being so cold on his ankle, it numbed him, but he was actually able to hike back out. And so he headed to a pile of rocks 150 feet below. Miraculous, he stopped short of this rock mound, and it was a miracle. And so I think again, that's why God says He's always with. He's not going to allow us to crash and burn. Sometimes physically he does. You know, uh, we all know things where people have died, young kids have died, people have died, but in God's eyes, it's a welcoming into his heavenly kingdom. So ultimately, even though in our minds we might crash and burn, in God's eyes, this is only temporary for all of us. There is never a good time for someone to die, whether a child or someone in their 90s. Even their 90s, we think, oh, I wish I had one more day, don't we? One more day. I wish I could have said one more thing. Death is never a good time, unless, of course, someone's suffering horribly. But we're all going to get there unless the Lord comes in a rapture. But He will always be there. We will be in His arms. Now, part two, real quick, just some wilderness safety things, and I just think we need to do this. Be strong in the Lord and the strength of His might. Put on His full armor. Each day, just be aware of God. This is your day. I have a really good, well, I have a friend. We've been out of contact for many years, but we went to kindergarten together, elementary school, and everything. And I've been seeing him on Facebook. Apparently, he's very, very ill. And I texted him just yesterday, I think it was, and told him, I'm so sorry to hear this. And he says, he lives near the ocean somewhere up the coast. And he gave a beautiful shot of the sunset across the ocean. He said, I've been laying in my bed for the couch here for quite a while. So it sounds like this is a pretty serious thing he's got. So I told him I'll be, praying for him. And he wrote back, he says, whether I have one day to live or 300 days, I am totally in the Lord's hands, 100%. I'm His. I thought, man, for a guy like that to be able to say that, so he's understood. He's finally understood what it's like to have the armor of God and to be able to see down the path. His pathway is clear. He knows that this life, no matter how short it is, he's going to be with the Lord in heaven. It's just so some practical things. Signal for help. SOS, three short, three long, three short. Okay. Any set of threes is usually using a universal sign for help. Uh, and three waves, three, whatever you can do. Three's usually a sign for that. A signal mirror, I mentioned this once before. It's a really good way if you have always hike with some kind of a mirror because it acts like a strobe light during the day. If you can catch the sun's rays, like some people say make a V, and like if I that plug on the wall, let's say that's a cabin way, way, way out there. I can either put my thumb there or make a V, whatever, put the spot right in the crux of your V or right at your thumb. You get the sunlight to travel down your arm, just wiggle it off and on and off of your thumb like that. They will see that. And you can do an incredible thing with the mirror. Flashlight at night, you can always do the signal, the Morse code thing with the flashlight. Whistle, blowing sets of threes. Blow three long, short blast, three long, three, whatever. Whistles are really, really good. Many times that can pierce through where a voice won't always. Sometimes a voice will do it where a whistle won't. Wilderness is so strange with sounds. Things that you don't think will carry, things, whatever. Also, when hiking, another thing I don't think I might address in the book, but I don't think I do here is clothing. May mention this later. Don't wear ridiculous clothes that just clash with everybody. Huge, massive fluorescent of whatever. But don't wear things that blend in with nature either. Wear something that kind of sticks out a little bit. Orange, your reds, whatever that might not be, your browns, can camouflage real easy because when helicopters, especially or whatever, hovering over, they can spot something out of the ordinary from the surroundings around you. And another thing too, if you're out in an open thing and a helicopter's coming after you, believe it or not, lay on your back, wave your arms on your back. Because if you're standing straight up and a helicopter comes over you, you're only this big, right? The width of your shoulders. If you're laying down and going like that, now you're this big. So think of what it looks like from the air. Okay, I know what I did. Now, if the trail becomes ambiguous, stop. See where my arrow is? It looks like right underneath that arrow is a false trail, doesn't it? I would say it's either probably a game trail, possibly so, but as you can see how easily it would be for a hiker to think that's a switchback and going along that false trail right below where that red arrow is. Another thing you don't want to do is cut across switchbacks. See my blue arrow? You can see where people have gone from that high trail to the low trail. That ruins a hillside. So what that's going to do is once it starts raining, the water is going to go down and wash out the lower trail. It's going to mess up the vegetation. It just ruins the hillsides. Plus, that's how people break ankles and get injured knees and fall by suddenly doing and the reason for a switchback like that is because it's easier on the hiker to gradually do elevation rather than straight up. So that's why switchbacks are made. So when you cut switchbacks from the high end to the low end, you're going much steeper, than the trail should be. And that's where people slip and rocks are unstable. Show courtesy to faster, slower hikers. Everyone has the right to be on a trail. So if you're going a little slower, and someone else go faster, don't think, oh, they're not going to pass me, No, stand over, wish them a good day, whatever, and be courteous. Keep noise to a level. I don't know. I always think it's strange to see people hiking with earphones on. I think, can't you do that down there? Listen to what the mountains have to say to you. Maybe they're taking an online course. I don't know. But keep all dogs on a leash. Uh, there's birthday Kim. That's Kim. A number of years ago, we used to hike the Sierras all the time. I think that's Sequoia, wasn't it? May have been. But anyway, always hike with a partner. I hiked with Ken. Okay, hiking with a partner gives therapy for the soul. I've said before, next time a friend goes through a tough time, say, hey, let's go on a hike. It's amazing how people open up out on the trail. It really is. You go out on a trail hiking with friends, all of a sudden, you start talking about things you normally wouldn't say, or you're opening up, or, so it's an excellent, excellent therapy. The dangers of taking the path of least resistance. Okay, this is a picture I found that I thought was kind of cool. Downhill hiking can pose trouble for a fatigued or overambitious hiker. For example, like take a look at my arrow there. You see that bush right below the arrow there? It looks like from where the camera is, you could walk straight across to that bush. But uh, and the city lights up, but what you were not under seeing is there's a canyon right here, right below that area, is that right before us. And you can see, as you see, there's a line going there. There's a drop off, a canyon. So lost hikers, they would think, oh, I can walk over there to that bush. Well, they get to that end where the ground kind of disappears, and suddenly there's a drop off in front of them. See, our eyes, we only see straight. We don't see down and around curves. And so this is what gives hikers a lot of trouble. They'll be up maybe like at the bottom of this picture here, and they'll see the city lights out there and say, oh, we'll just weave our way out there. And all of a sudden you're going into canyons, you're getting drop-offs. It was no clue that was even there. Uh, Decomposed slopes can cause rock slides. So again, always stay on trails. And so I gave a little spiritual summary at the end of part two. Um, this isn't in part three yet, but it says, oops. I've directed you in the way of wisdom. I've led you in upright paths. Again, the Bibles are wisdom. Watch the path of your feet. The kind of thing of this is, following the right track. So it's kind of a lesson on following the path. And all your ways will be established. Do not turn to the right or to the left. Turn your foot from evil. And so that's one of the things you guys are going to discuss tonight. How do we know which is right? How do we know which is left? How do we know when God is speaking or not? So when you come up with an answer, let me know. So for part three, each week I just take a couple of my chapters. A lot of the words I have on the slides, I just kind of pulled from the book. So if you're following along, you'll notice some of those. I just pull and some of these others. And so I had Kim bring this up for me. You see, this right here is what you're seeing hanging from that. That's called the Arizona vortex. It was created by a guy who lives in Arizona, and Reed Thorne, and he came up with that tripod thing that is a lot of different angles, and you can actually. The problem with bringing someone up from over a cliff with a litter is once you get at the edge. How do you pop up over? Well, this Arizona vortex, what that allows you to do is be able to put this right by the cliffside, and you got to know a little bit of easy geometry, how to angle it so it doesn't topple over. But it allows the rescuers of the litter to come straight up. Then the rescuers pull them over the top rather than just popping right up over. But this is what we call a 4-to-1 mechanical advantage. And so if so with this, it's very, very powerful. With a very minimal pull, that'll pull your load straight up. It's a 4-to-1. And so we use mechanical advantages. One time we were doing a mock rescue, and I was a medic, and we had two of us. The two of us were medics, and so we had a member over the side. It was a training exercise. This guy must have weighed close to 300 pounds. And why they picked him as the rescue the injured person, I have no idea. Could not get him into the litter, could not pick this guy up. So he luckily was under a tree. So I rigged this thing up to one of the branches, hooked this onto his sit harness, and very easily kind of lifted him up over, and we sat him back down in the litter. So a 4-to-1 mechanical advantage is a very powerful tool. I said, come to me, all who are weary, burdened, and I will give you rest. See, the thing after verse after verse is you got to think, my eye is on you. Yeah, we may take some false turns in life. We might get in some scary things, but we've got to remember God is really there. And that's where sometimes we just say, it's up to you. God, it's up to you. You're just going to have to lead whatever. It's kind of a thing between you and God. There's no formula really on how do you know God's voice? But there are some things I think, general tips we can use. What does the Bible say? What has life taught us? That's why I think groups like this are good because we can share to each other. Well, I learned this, about life. I learned that. When this happens, I've learned, to whatever. When using mechanical advantage, get a little physics here. When you have a one-to-one rope system, like just hauling, a bucket of water up. When using a one-to-one rope system, it'll take 150 pounds to lift a 150-pound weight. Using a 2-to-1 system like that, it'll take 75 pounds of force to lift a 150-pound weight. For every foot raised in a 2-to-1 system, you're going to use 2 feet of rope to lift 1 foot. In a 3-to-1, and a 3-to-1 was a very popular one we used for most rescues, because you can put three, maybe 4 pullers on a 3-to-1 and get a victim and the attendant up fairly easy. But in a 3-to-1 rope system, pullers can lift a 150-pound load using just 50 pounds of force. And then go on and on a 4-to-1, 5-to-1, 6-to-1, so on like that. So, however, the rescuers in a 3-to-one's got to pull 3 feet of rope for every foot the load raises. So you're having to reset, pull. So every 3 feet you pull, that'll go up a foot, and so, but it's a lot easier to pull. As the mechanical factors increase, the load factor becomes easier to operate. So, spiritual mechanical advantages. Let's take that and apply it spiritually. Our spiritual life works much like a mechanical advantage system. When we find ourselves over the cliff or the edges of life, necessity dictates that we implement the correct spiritual mechanical advantage system. If we decide to implement a one-to-one spiritual mechanical advantage system, we're going to function independently, probably like this young lady. Oh, what do I do? I've got to make my own decision. How will this work out? Well, so on. So we're not going to ask for advice. We're not going to pray. We're not going to read the Bible. And we're certainly not going to listen to God's voice on a one-to-one spiritual mechanical advantage system. We're pulling our own weight. We might ask someone for spiritual guidance if we incorporate a 2-to-1 spiritual mechanical advantage. And that's a good thing, talking to someone else. However, if we up the game to a 3-to-1, 4-to-1, or 5-to-1 spiritual mechanical advantage system, we're going to begin using all of our spiritual mechanical advantage forces. We're going to ask others for advice and prayer. We're going to pray and ask God for help and guidance. We're going to read our Bible, for spiritual instruction. We'll listen intently to hear God's voice. We'll attend a church and fellowship with other believers. Now we're putting in 5-to-1 mechanical advantage systems here, and the load is going to be much, much easier for us. The more forces we use, the easier life becomes for us. We're going to seek other people's advice. Like I said, seek God's advice in a group like this, like you are out there. Going to read our Bibles, listen to God's voice, attend church, fellowship with other believers. Like I said, the more forces we use, the easier life becomes for us. And then the last thing I did in chapter 4:7, sometimes the path we take is going to include small steps. Okay, let endurance have its perfect result so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Sometimes the best choice is to either stay put and you're where you are and do what you're doing to the best that you can until maybe God opens the door, or you get advice, wisdom some way. Or sometimes it's just plodding along step by step by step rather than taking ridiculous leaps and bounds. Oh, I'm going to quit. I'm going to move out of the state. I'm going to sell everything. I'm going to be a hermit. Other than take these massive wild leaps, sometimes it's just endurance step by step. When we searched for lost hikers, we often relied on our tracking skills, which took years to develop. Same with our spiritual life. Spiritual maturity takes time. At first, when learning tracking would start in a small area. I remember when we first learned, we were in uh, a small parking lot. We just kind of working. And then as we got better, we enlarged the tracking area until we practiced at miles in Southern California's Mojave Desert. We'd go out in the Mojave Desert and do track, would send someone out, and then for a long distance, and we learned to track them and find where they were. But it took time. Perfecting any skill takes endurance, discipline, and patience, and small steps from the beginning are necessary. If we're going to track through the Mojave, we've got a team step, using our tracking stick, measuring the footprint, measuring the stride, step by step by step. Then once we start getting a pattern, now we can expand and move very, very quickly. New Christians should begin their Bible journey. I said, like my brother and I started to learn basics of auto mechanics. And my dad, when our dad passed away, we were seniors in college. He'd always take our cars to the mechanic and have it done. And I remember my brother and I said, this is going to be too expensive. We can't have our mom paying for all of this. So we said, let's fix our own cars. We knew nothing about cars. Our dad was a very, very intellectual man. I don't know why I didn't get it, but he wasn't mechanically inclined at all. So we didn't learn anything really about it. And so what my brother and I decided to do, well, we got to figure out an engine. So back when we had Sears catalogs, we bought ourselves a toy plastic engine that you actually put this little model together, and the pistons and all of this and the flywheel and everything. We glued it, put it together. And I remember when we hooked it to the battery, the pistons went out. The thing worked. I thought, oh my goodness. And we learned the parts from that. And then we went up to Chaffey College and bought their auto mechanic book. And I'll never forget, we went out into the garage, we raised the hood of the car, we sat on the porch, and we turned to page 1. And we started reading chapter 1. And the first thing we learned, I'll never forget this, the first thing we learned about the cars after that, putting our model together, was the oil plug underneath, where the oil plug was. We thought that was the greatest breakthrough. This is the oil plug. This is where you drain the oil. Well, we started working until eventually we completely tore apart our 1973 Dodge Challenger engine and rebuilt the whole thing and got it running. Little steps from a toy model thing to rebuilding an engine in a 1973 Dodge Challenger. Just take small steps. New Christians, I like to say, get a Bible storybook, not a children's Bible, but a children's Bible storybook that from Genesis to, probably to the end, Revelation, whatever, but they're the main stories of the Bible. So I tell them to get a children's storybook, because that's going to give you kind of a chronological step through, with the stories of the Bible. Kind of, it's like my model, plastic model engine. We'll start small like that, a children's storybook. After that, then get your Bible with study notes in it. It's amazing how important study notes can be. You don't have to begin in Genesis. Start reading about Jesus in the book of Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. Any of those Gospels. As you start your new Christian journey, your spiritual life is going to start blossoming. Whatever your path takes you, notice these are small steps, okay? You're not racing, you're not running, you're not leapfrogging. They're step by step. Whatever path you take, you can trust God's presence and leadership. However, keep your focus on Him. I remember Pastor Dave Burns, who was our original pastor, he said one time, sometimes God just lets you do what you want to do, but just take Him with you. Sometimes I think God allows you, hey, okay, if this is really what you to do, I'll bless it, but take me with you. Keep your focus on Him. Isaiah says, the steadfast of mind you will keep in perfect peace because He trusts in you. The more we can mature and realize God really is in control, why isn't my life going the way I really want it to go? Other than, God, I'm trusting you. I'm going to be happy right here, doing the best I can where I am, trusting in you, because maybe you don't want me to go that way. And just see if He opens doors. And sometimes our best blessing is right doing what we're doing. We're just not seeing the potential of where we are. I remember I did a physical one time. I had to go to Kaiser and get blood drawn. And I remember the gal who did it. I just had a thought of saying when I left her, I said, when I think of you today, how can I pray for you? And she kind of took back and said, pray a better job. So I was okay. I go away and I think, why don't you see where you are right now? See the potential you have right now. You're getting a paycheck, you're doing well. Turn what you have into something. Maybe if you really had a better attitude about this, you might really, really start going up into the Kaiser, facility program, become an overseer, manager, or something. Sometimes we get so upset thinking we want to get out of where we are, and we don't realize we're standing in a gold mine. We're just not seeing it here. Even though you may not always feel God's leading, continue to take those small steps, trusting in Him. Life might feel like fixing an automobile or hiking in the dark, one glue piece at a time, but rely on the best resources possible. Take one step at a time. When you take these small steps, don't, look back with doubt. Just keep on going. I like to use the phrase, stay the course. Sometimes when you don't know what to do, just stay the course where you are, doing the best that you can, asking God, is this where you really want my life to blossom? Right here where we are, where I'm standing. Maybe I've got oil under the ground here, under my shoes, spiritually, or physically, you might say, and I'm not realizing I'm standing on an oil field or a gold mine or something like this. Keep looking straight ahead. Trust that God will clear your path like this. Lamentation says, the Lord acts of mercy indeed do not end. For his compassions do not fail. They're new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Um, so, summary, whether you're trying to follow God's tracks through life or find yourself on an 800-foot ledge of disaster, God will always be with you. He'll never leave you. Hebrews 13:5-6 says, He himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever abandon you. And that alone should give us comfort. Okay, so that we confidently say, The Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What will man do to me? So with that, let's go to prayer. Lord, Heavenly Father, we just thank you. I just pray that in our lives, that no matter if we're taking one step at a time or suddenly we're looking down at an 800-foot ledge of life, that either way we can stay steadfast and know that you're guiding our steps, and we give you praise in Jesus' name. Amen.